Hey, you guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm super excited to have one of my really good friends on today. Again, she's been on another video and I'm sure she'll be on like a million more. So Jacquelynne Holmes is here today, aka Luxom Babe. You've probably seen her on my page before. And the other day, she was sharing on her stories this concept, and I was like, this, you need to like blast this everywhere. This is super interesting. And so then we were like, let's just do a YouTube video about it. So before we go into that, Jacquelynne, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Jacquelynne. I live in Arizona and I'm Magick CFO, spiritual guide for women entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So just as a warning, our conversations get juicy and real. Our intention is for you to laugh a lot, to learn a lot, and just like there's no fluff ever between the two of us. We're both very direct, very straightforward. And are really interested in, the entrepreneurship world, but also the world of spirituality and energy and all that sort of thing. And both of us have been in the coaching industry for like a while now. And we do very different things, but also like the same thing in some capacities. So we've seen a lot of different things. And what we wanted to talk about today is sort of the darker energy that can come with when we're working in the energetic realm. This is stuff that a lot of people aren't talking about. And you'll see people utilize, like Jacquelynne was talking about this in her story about, people with very large followings utilizing a lot of like things that they might not be super familiar with. And then there can just be repercussions for that other people aren't necessarily seeing. And this isn't like shading people with big followings. That's just an example, because anybody actually could be doing this. But I think from other people's perspective, sometimes we'll see like big riches or big rewards or big, some sort of big outcome. And we're like, oh, that's wonderful. That's great. That's really exciting. But we're not seeing like the karmic repercussions that might be associated, that might be in the Akashic records or something that we could see. But anyways, Jacquelynne, what do you want to say to start?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to a lot of us got into spirituality through like the law of attraction, The Secret, other type of like law of attraction or new agey type of doctrines. And for a lot of people, a lot of us have also like spiraled out of that and come into a more like holistic understanding of the esoteric concepts that those type of books represent. And we're able to see how surface level and maybe like watered down they are. But when someone isn't like evolving out of kind of like these whitewashed topics or these watered down topics, what they can get stuck in is this kind of like this hopeless cycle of attempting to manipulate the physical plane, right? Which is what manifestation is the spirit the spirit, the thought form creating the material form. And but what is covered in the law of attraction is so shallow compared to the true like esoteric or exoteric concepts around that. And so people get this addiction to manipulating the physical plane. And what it actually leads them to is basically like degrading their soul and going down like a materialist timeline, or like an overly scientific materialist timeline, which is outdated for our spiritual evolution and what we're here to do, how we are here to spiritually evolve. We're not here to spiritually evolve by going further down a materialist plane. We're here to spiritually evolve by ascending off of the spiritual plane. So that's the gist of it. We can kind of go from there.
Yeah. And so like one of the things too that I want to speak to, and you just brought this in a little bit, is not understanding really what we're working with energetically. And I talk about this all the time. Like people, we think sometimes that we understand so much about energy, and it's like we're just like, this is just coming back into the mainstream. Like, just because you've read 2 books or taken a shaman course, like, doesn't mean that you understand all of the different things that can happen in these different energetic planes. Or like you were speaking about, like, who you're calling in or what energies you're tampering with in order to get what you want. Because I think a lot of people watching this will resonate with this. Like, if you're working with a specific deity or being and you're like, I really want this, this is what I desire, and there's sort of a feeling of like, it will come in divine timing, and you sort of have to just accept that, or it's like, you know that it's either that or something better that you can't think of or you can't imagine. But sometimes then if people are bringing things in that might be like not necessarily meant for them, for sure that could be a lower entity, like, aha, would you sign a contract to sell your soul? And like, that sort of, you can probably imagine like some cheesy thing in a movie, but there's entities of all sorts and energies of all sorts that we're not going to probably go in this direction with this conversation, but like, if you look in Hollywood and look at all of these other people with really big names, like, what are they giving up to receive all of that fame? And so it's the same energy that's just on a much bigger spectrum that we can see.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that that exact topic is where you see like the Doreen virtues, right? You see the people that had material success under that paradigm and they got kind of like scared straight and they went, whoa, just kidding. Jesus is everything. The Bible is like everything, right? And they have this like saved experience. I always kind of, I don't know, I have this perspective like, me being someone that I always feel like I'm learning. I always feel like there's still so much for me to learn. There's so much more information to absorb. Sometimes I look at that kind of transformation and I'm like, well, am I like missing something? Am I like missing, like, did that just like not happen to me yet? And that's why. But like further observation, like seeing this happen over and over and over again, like my intuition is telling me it's because a lot of people are dabbling in a materialization process, exactly like you said, where you're selling out, you're selling your soul. What it really is like engaging with the Armonic impulse rather than the Christ impulse. And they're engaging with it. And then they go, whoa, that is like, they see what's actually happening. They see how it's like it's like rotting their soul from the inside out. And they just kind of like snap into the other extreme. It's going from one extreme to another. And I think that, like you said, with the divine timing and all of that, that only happens when you're forcing the materialization, you're forcing the manifestations. And a lot of people, they are doing that. They are manifesting or engaging in like rituals and manifestation practices 2,000, 3,000 times harder than they're doing anything else spiritually. Like their entire spiritual relationship is just purely manifesting. And when we start to see like that forcing or this like this domination over this 3D plane, and also taking into account all of the media we're absorbing, even books like The Secret and all of that, that is all, it's all infiltrated material, right? That is all infiltrated serving a specific timeline. And the reason that you would need to master or dominate the 3D plane is because you're not going to spiritually evolve off of this plane. Kind of like the Elon Musks. It's like, why is he so hell-bent on getting off of this planet? Is no one stopping to ask why he wants to get off of this planet so bad? It's because they're that kind, right? They're kind. They can never evolve. They're going to be on Earth reincarnating, trying to enter into the Christ stream or the organic human timeline over and over and over and over again, to the point that they're literally just going to have to force themselves onto another planet because they'll never get off of this planet. So yeah.
There's that little drop for you guys. Yeah. And I think the word you used in the beginning explains that energy really well, of like the desperation. And also, I'm just like having this come into my field right now, like high magic and low magic. And some people would call low magic black magic. High magic is when you are cultivating something that's of the highest good for yourself and everyone connected to you. So that might not mean that you get exactly what it is you desire, because that could harm someone else close to you. That You know, it's like when people say they want to manifest $1 zillion and then their parents die. And it's like, well, I didn't mean an inheritance because of that. Like,
Exactly.
so it's
Yeah.
really important to have that intention of, I want what's ever of the highest good for all, including myself, but also everyone connected to me. Whereas then black magic, or like engaging with the shadow realm or the darker beings, it's like, you know, that you're engaging in a way that might hurt other people, or you're willing to sacrifice things that, I mean, maybe it's just your soul, maybe it's just connected to you, not like sacrificing literally someone close to you or something. But I mean, this, you could even look at this and like this might not be connected to this, but this is just what's coming into my mind right now. Like, giving up everything for something that you want, and you give up like the partner of your dreams who is with you, and it's like, well, I'm going to sacrifice this relationship so that I can have what I want. Then later, like, you have that thing and you're like, well, now I don't have anyone close to me and I want, you know, and that might be something totally different. What do you think?
No, I think, well, and that's a great point that you brought up, the concept of sacrifice, because that's how the universal laws are built. Like, we do have to give up something. I mean, that's in so
Yeah.
many spiritual texts, and it's just like such a common theme at this point. Like, whether that's, you know, I love that you brought up like high and low magic, because that resonates so much more than black magic and all of that with me. But you know, you look at low magic, sacrificing animals, ritual abuse, all of that type of stuff. There is still an aspect of sacrifice, but high magic, or, you know, for the collective consciousness, would be, let's give up, let's sacrifice a bad habit that we have. Let's sacrifice an aspect of ourselves that we're willing to let go. What that can also look like, and I think that the key to like high magic materialization or manifestation is like, you're actually giving up the material plane. You're releasing the material plane, where you have this sense of non-permanence, where it's not yours. You have the willingness to give it up at any time, and that consequently brings the most material success, or the most sustainable material success. So there's always an aspect of like sacrifice in what we're doing to gain something, right? Like, in order to reach for something higher, we have to let go of what's in our hand. There's always like an aspect of that when we're reaching our next level, whether that's of success in this material plane or our spiritual evolution. So, but it's about, you know, what energy are you doing it behind? Are you doing it from this place of like, you are here to, you know, try to master and dominate this 3D realm? You're seeking to manipulate this 3D realm. It's easy to fall into that, because that's the predominant impulse on our planet right now. Like, even down to the architecture in our buildings, that might be going like way off topic, but like Frank Lloyd Wright, like if you look at his story and his success and what actually occurred in his life, and the architecture behind what he was building, you can perfectly see the example of like karma playing itself back, or like the result of delving into these like lower astral energies.
So he's the airplane guy, right?
Frank Lloyd Wright is he's an architect. So he was, his architecture is really famous. It's much more in my face because I lived in Scottsdale for so long, where he has a big monument there, and his second property was there. But coincidentally, like a lot of people that practice low magic like his architecture, because something that he believed in is that the wrong architecture could actually make someone go insane. So you could be in a house that could literally make you insane just based off of the architecture of the house. So he practiced that kind of stuff all the time. So it's even down to, it's not just the media we're consuming, it's like the buildings that we're in, the materials that are being used. Like, there's so much that, again, has just been infiltrated, where it's actually easier to slip into that. It's easier to slip into that timeline. And that's where the discernment comes in, where we have to recognize like where our soul is going. And when we see a lot of people have these kind of like Doreen Virtue, like snapback kind of moments, we have to really like read between the lines and see what's really going on there, because it's not just it's not just, it's something that we all have to snap out of, but it's about where we're going after we like develop the discernment. You know, for people like you and I, where we've been in the spiritual realms, we're like, you know, you're trained in a lot of this kind of stuff. You know, I'm sure you've had experiences where you're like your mediumship experiences where you're like, whoa, what the heck is this? Like, this is not, we have this practice and energetic boundaries. And I think everyone that's in a spiritual practice or into spirituality beyond just like, you know, the 3D dogmatic religions and organized religions, you're going to have a moment that wakes you up to the discernment that's needed. Whether that's really scary and terrifying for you, like mine was literally seeing reptilians and having that whole experience, or whether it's like, oh, you're like helping dead people cross over in the forest, or whatever your experience was, like stuff like that. Like we all have those moments where we're like, oh, this is what this actually is. We need to like put up energetic boundaries around it. So
Yeah, you brought up so much good stuff. I'm like, wait, what did I want to say to this? Because I was just listening. Well, to start with like what you said last, I think for me, it's always really helpful. And I teach this to my students who are going into the Akashic records, because like manifesting is different from, and manifesting is a little different, I think, than like going into other realms. Manifesting, you're calling energy in, and maybe something is going to come in to support you with that. But when you're literally going into other realms, and this even happens like when you're smoking weed or you're going into a higher dimension than you might be used to. So that's actually going into another realm. So it could be on a smaller level like that, or like you're consciously like, okay, I'm going to go into something like the Akashic records, or I'm going to go into a much higher dimension, which in those places, I think that it's, when you're going into a place with a higher dimension, it's less likely that like fearful sort of energies can even exist there, because it's, that dimension is based in the frequency of unconditional love. Anyway, so I tell my students, I'm like, the best way to ask when you're starting to feel an energy come in, if you should be engaging with it, these energies have to follow certain rules. So they can't lie to you. They have to answer questions honestly. And so you can ask them, are you based in love and light? And you will immediately have, even if you don't hear an answer, or if you can't see anything, you're just sensing it, you'll immediately have some sort of gut reaction. Sometimes it's kind of like, I'm not really sure. Ask it 3 times and you will have an answer that is solid. And if it's not like, yes, like command that energy out, because like I started doing this so at nighttime, I used to start seeing like beings in my room. This was in 2020. And it was when all my gifts, like I was very intuitive before, but it was when all my gifts were like really activating on another level, like the mediumship stuff and all these other things. And they would kind of like freak me out, because sometimes I would see them and sometimes I wouldn't, but I would like wake up in the middle of the night and like, there is something in the corner of my room. I know it. Like I can feel it. And so I would ask that question, like, are you of love and light? And sometimes it would be like, yes, I'm a benevolent force. I want to help support you in your ascension. And other times it would be kind of like, I wouldn't see anything, but there would be this feeling or this frequency of like a scary smirk. It's like, get the fuck out of here. You are unwelcome. I command you out of my space. And that's actually all you really have to say. Like scary movies and stuff have made us think that those darker energies, or energies stuck in lower dimensions, like have so much power over us. They don't. It's just, if we're in fear, then they can feed on that fear. But if we are strong in our discernment of like, you need to leave, you're not welcome here, they will.
which is the whole purpose of horror movies, right? Is to feed on the fear created. So yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point of like cleansing your space for that. And I love that you brought up like not having the fear, because that was something that held me back actually for a really long time from developing more spiritually, or just like diving into more, because I had such strong psychic experiences. And then after I had the reptilian experiences, I was just like, fuck man, like I'm not trying to, it's exhausting sometimes. It's like, I'm not trying to do this, or you feel like you're just kind of like always being watched, or like that energy is really dominant. And so, yeah, it does take a lot of, you know, and that's also a sign to kind of back off. That's a sign to, you need to develop that like strength within, and that energy within the light body and all of that before you keep going and keep pushing forward, right? So also like things that we're experiencing, you know, the reason we're able to perceive them is because there is an aspect of ourselves that can perceive it. So that a lot of that is highlighting like the darkness within us that needs to be brought to light and alchemized and all of that. So having that perspective of it too definitely helps. So when yeah, like with clients or, you know, with people when they finally experience or they like kind of dispel the illusions or they're able to see the low magic or the black magic they've been participating in, or they see the parasite, or they see one of my dreams was like pulling black goo out of my throat, like I was coughing up black goo, right? When they have those kind of experiences, they're like, oh, that's where, you know, that's where I needed to protect myself more. That's where I needed to like hold the boundaries more and actually build the boundaries. Not just letting anybody else into your energy too. So that's another big part of that is, you know, other people that don't, it's kind of like not letting people around you that don't take baths and shower. Like if you don't have good spiritual hygiene and you're just like channeling whatever the fuck, or you're just allowing anything into your space, like, no, you will not do a reading for me. Like you do not have permission to tap into my energy. And that's another thing I see a lot, you know, being in the online coaching space and the online space too, is like, a lot of people just think because you post your picture online that they can tap into your energy and they can channel for you, or they have a message coming through for you. And not just like the spammers either. Like, I don't know, people get these weird like energy attachments online. And it's because if they have, you know, they're connected to dark entities or like lower astral entities, those lower astral entities are seeking out the like organic spiritual human. They're actually searching and seeking for it. So they're always going to be drawn in by someone that has light that's been developed, or pure light that's been developed, but doesn't have a boundary around it. Like a pure open light, what you're actually doing is you're just like, it's like a what are those things by the ocean called?
Lighthouses.
Lighthouse. Yeah. It's like a lighthouse, like, hey, come over here. Like
Yeah.
dark entities, come over here and look at my beautiful light that doesn't have any shield around it, you know? And that's kind of maybe a pessimistic way of looking at it. But that's again, just what I've seen over and over again is like, there has to be this like awakening moment where you decide that you're protecting that light. So
Absolutely. And that's too, we see this all the time with like narcissists being attracted to empaths. Because there's like, it's part of the mastery when you learn to develop more of your light, which I think we all are learning at different levels, because every time we maybe raise in consciousness or become brighter in whatever capacity, we have to have stronger boundaries. And so a lot of times I think empaths attract that, or people who are like going to walk all over their boundaries literally to learn how to have stronger boundaries. And okay, I think this part's also important. So you were talking about how people are like sometimes consciously looking for other beings to like, oh, I'm going to read your energy, or I'm going to do this, and there might be sort of a malicious intent. But I think also it's equally important for us to have discernment for people who are just like new and eager and they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And I was talking to someone about this the other day, and he was like, oh, I was out at a bar and this person was like, oh, I'm going to read your energy. And I was like, first of all, I was like, I have a bone to pick with this person. First of all, if you're drinking, you would never read someone's energy because your perspective is skewed. So I automatically know that person doesn't know what they're doing. Number two, you never just read someone else's energy that's out of integrity. Like you have to get permission from them where they actually know what it is you're doing. They have to consent to it. And you can't just like randomly go out and read other people's energy. There has to be an exchange. And so even like if you were the person sitting at a bar and that happens, you're exchanging, you're letting them see something within you, which maybe they're more masterful than you know, and they're going to be looking at other things. I don't know. So I think it's also just being aware of people who might have good intentions, but they're just not like really qualified. Or there are things like that where they're not holding the mastery or the integrity required for someone to look at your energy. And this is like, you'll see this on Etsy. Like I was telling Jacquelynne, I just started putting my Akashic record readings on Etsy to like reach more people. And there are people are doing readings for $5. I'm like, why would you ever let someone into your field for $5? They obviously don't know what they're doing unless they like live somewhere where they don't need to make any money. But like, I don't know. It's like that stuff. I'm like that. Ew, that is not clean. Like yeah.
Oh yeah, there's so many situations like that where I got invited to this one spiritual practice where you don't see the practitioner, but she lights a candle for your energy for 5 days and I'm sure I told you about that.
I've heard about stuff like this.
And she keeps your energy active, and as long as the candle is burning, but you're never seeing her face or anything. It's just like I don't know. That's all I needed to see, where I'm like, holy shit, like, no, like you are not, I don't know. It's suspicious. And I even think what I come across more so than like a brand new person is someone that is almost like a wolf in sheep's clothing, like, oh, ha ha ha. And then it is actually, with malicious intent. A lot of the malicious intent is unconscious. It's not actually conscious to what they're doing. But again, it's because they have the parasites and the entities attached to them that they're not actually able to see that the type of harm that they're causing. And again, when we have the perspective that we know it's easier to slip into that than it is to slip into like a higher consciousness, or to like actually cultivate a higher consciousness for like the collective good, the most high, the highest collective timeline, it's not a surprise that it's like a drain that's just circling. It's just like a downward spiral. And we actually have to go against that current to create that upward spiral. Because that's also the timeline of where this is the separation of the timelines. This is where New Earth is created. This is where the existing Earth, the old structures, the old paradigm is going to continue to devolve. And this is like the breakaway. And again, breakaway civilization being a really consistent theme in multiple spiritual texts from all over the world, from many different points in history. There's just people that are going to continue down the old paradigm and continue into the materialization and trying to force things through nature and force things through the planet. And then there's those of us that are, whatever that looks like, whether that is you coming back to like a biblical God or like the Bible, or you coming back to something that's a little bit more of a holistic view of spirituality, people that are interested in the ascension. That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. Are you devolving or are you evolving? What's the choice there? So
yeah. And you said something interesting, I think more towards the beginning of this, like some of us are like, well, I've been doing all the manifesting too, but like I don't have 7 million people on YouTube yet, or I don't have like 7 million in my bank account yet, but this person over here did it so quickly. And like then thinking that we might be doing something wrong. And I think that that's like, I actually very much resonate with that. And I think a lot of people will too, of like, what's the difference though? And for me, I feel like, the very common question of like, what is it that you would be doing for free? Like if you had $1 zillion and you never had to make any money, would you still be doing the same work for free because you genuinely love it? Or like, are you only in the manifesting game, or are you only in the game of like trying to work with energy to get something from it? Is that why you're doing it? Because I know like I'd be doing ceremonies and shit and like pulling cards, even if it never got me anything other than feeling a sense of peace. Like I love that sort of thing. I would for sure be doing ceremonies and looking at the moon for reasons other than like, oh, well, this is going to help me manifest $1 zillion or manifest like the love of my life, or, whatever your job that you want, whatever it might be. And I think what you brought up earlier is really the key, like, what's the motivation? truly behind it.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Cause it's also like, you know, we are on this 3D planet. Like, we're not here to just have this like up in the clouds, like airy fairy spiritual experience. Like, we are actually here to experience the density of this planet. And part of that right now is earning money in order to survive. Like, that's what our survival looks like. And so it's like, to me, it comes back to like the service, right? If you have the energy of service and serving others, and whatever you're doing, making money, and that's the money that you're making, or that's the mode of how you're making money, then that's how we stay like logically consistent or spiritually consistent and like congruent. Spiritually congruent is like the right word.
Yeah.
With how we're building wealth or bringing in abundance. And that's also like one of those conflated topics of like money being the root of all evil and like seeking money being, you know, an aspect of darkness or whatever. But really what that is you can master this 3D plane. You can have control over aspects of this 3D plane. That's what we're here to do. We are here to play in this 3D plane, but you can do it without devolving your soul and degrading yourself spiritually. And so that's like the key of like, you actually do both. I've seen this a lot too, where people will achieve material success and then they'll completely stop growing. It's like they used those tools to get to a certain place and then they're just done. It's not even like a stopping point, like a pit stop. It's like, okay, this is as far as I'm going with this. You used it to get to something and now you're done growing as a soul. And that's where that starts to become actually degrading, and we're bringing ourselves denser and denser and denser and further and further away from reincarnating out of the 3D plane or ascending out of the 3D plane.
Yeah. Yeah. And this kind of makes me feel like, you know, the concept of wealth and richness, it's like full spectrum, because it's like, yes, be rich in the bank account, but also like, are you rich in love? Are you rich in joy? Are you rich in like your daily experience? And I think that that's one of the things, if you guys can't see back here, I wrote a book called Sacred Wealth. Shameless shout out. Like, for me, the spiritual aspect of wealth is like learning to feel rich as a human, and like not necessarily because of what you have. And that's something that I feel like protects us, might be something that is a form of protection, because it's not just about like, what can I conquer, what can I acquire, which is just like the colonization mindset, like how much more can I get, because there's this like insatiable hunger to conquer things, versus do I feel rich? And then also asking ourselves, like, this is like my favorite topic, like, when I have the money, or what, like, as I'm seeing the money in my bank account, how do I want to use that to better my own life, to better the people around me in the world? And I was thinking about this today for myself, and I was like writing a list, and I was like, okay, my wealth is of high service to the planet, and my wealth like allows me to, with my wealth, I'm able to support people in understanding how to create systems that contribute to the world and are not harmful, or byproducts from companies that are doing the work to actually change these like really entrenched systems, instead of buying the cheaper thing at the store because I don't have enough money, you know? And like all these things like this, like you were talking about, well, I don't remember exactly what it was you said, but we can use the wealth to bring us into the new age and to change that paradigm. And oh, what you were saying was around like money is the root of all evil. Like what I just said is the total opposite of that. Like it's not. It is a resource, and you know this, of course, but money is just a resource that can be used for whatever you want. And so when like light workers or people with good intentions or positive hearts or with higher vibrations have money, that's when everything on the planet changes. And I'm like, my money is going to rebuild and regrow the rainforest. Like that's not evil. That's like, so anyways, that was just a little rant.
Yeah. And that's a really good point where you're like, okay, why has my success, what you're essentially saying with like the YouTube thing, like why has my success seemed slower than other people that have seemed to do it quicker? And what I've also noticed in supporting a lot of really skilled and talented and heart spirit led mediums and psychics and everyone for the last couple years is that the reason financial success has eluded a lot of people is that it isn't inherently resonant to them. Like I think if this is gonna go like really weird sounding, but I think if our money was actually like gold or silver or something that's more coherent to us, or if it was like crystals, for example, and it was like actually more coherent, a lot of like light workers and a lot of people truly bringing the change to New Earth would have much more wealth than they do. But I kind of noticed, not like a starving artist type of paradigm, but kind of like that, where it's like it doesn't feel resonant, or it feel, they're like an Atlantean queen and this is just like peasant 3D money on this like peasant 3D earth of like, this, none of this really matters. Like a lot of people have this like, the psychics have this like way bigger scope of like time. We understand that like really this lifetime is just a speck, and like the eons and eons of life that we're here to live and all of that kind of stuff. So money doesn't feel resonant, so they don't earn it. And that's because our money is infiltrated. It isn't resonant to us. It isn't backed by anything. It's actually backed by our labor. And so that's kind of another component to this too. If the money came from our earth, or if we went back to a monetary system that was more resonant to us and to our spirit, I think a lot of us, would have materialized more wealth. And that's kind of the bridge that I like to make in my work is, yes, this is all bullshit from the Federal Reserve. None of this actually matters. The currency isn't backed by anything. Money isn't really real. It's all just kind of like a Ponzi scheme scam. But in this 3D plane right here today, it represents resources that will shift the power. And we're already starting to see the shift in the currencies. Like the dollar is, devaluing. Like even going to Mexico a couple of weeks ago, things are like 30% more expensive than they were last year. And that's because the dollar is devaluing. The difference between the peso and the dollar is like getting similar. It's still obviously a really high exchange rate and everything, but like we're already seeing the US dollar and the power structures start to even out. And that's like these balanced forces that are coming in. The US has been like so imperialistic and like the bully and starting all these wars for so long. Now we're seeing the power start to shift. Maybe it's to like other countries, not necessarily more deserving of that power, but we're going to start to see that with the new earth as well. And with, people that are spirit led and light led starting to amass more wealth, because that's the shift that's happening right now. Like the systems are being deplatformed. Things are like dissipating. Like the old financial system is actually dissolving. So as long as we are coherent and congruent with our spiritual beliefs, that is eventually going to lead to money, because the old system is you have to do something you don't want to do for money. You have to work in a cubicle under fluorescent lighting, or for most of the world, you have to, perform 16 hours of horrible physical labor every day in order to make a living, right? Like the systems are going to start to even out. And a lot of people that have been trying to like bring something in or like manifest financial security or financial success, they're going to start to notice it's actually going to start to happen faster because of the shifts that are happening on a collective scale.
That thing you said about the gems, I'm like, that resonates so deep for me. Like, yeah, I just had to like sit with that for a second, because that feels really real. Even when like I for sure believe like we're light workers are meant to be the richest people on the planet, because we're the ones, like if light workers were the ones in charge of Coca-Cola or in charge of all these big companies, like they would be doing like, you could still have the company and be running it so completely differently in a way that honors animals, honors the land, honors the air pollution, like, so there's not pollution, honors, all these different aspects. So anyway, yeah, that's all really, really interesting.
Yeah. So I think like if you are a light worker listening to this and you haven't achieved the level of like financial security or financial success that you want, you might need to start building a relationship with like more resonant currencies. Like silver is a really easy way to get into that because you can get an ounce of silver for like 20 or 30 bucks. Like I think the spot price is like $23 right now. And like holding silver to your body and feeling, there's so many uses for silver outside of money, but it has been historically used for money. I mean, for thousands and thousands of years. And it actually comes from the earth, right? It's not this made up concept of a Federal Reserve note that didn't come from anywhere. It actually came from like a bunch of horrible people creating a manipulative and slave-based financial system. So building a relationship with more resonant currencies it helps you ground into the 3D plane that we're here in, and then you're going to be less likely to dive into degrading manifestation practices that are actually eventually going to bring you further away from wealth. It might today bring you closer because today we're still under an old paradigm, but in the years to come, that's going to start to shift. So
Yeah, and even in like future lifetimes. Like if you look at
exactly.
that broader span of like, this is one lifetime, some people haven't had that many and some people have had a lot, a lot, a lot. And so then thinking about like, maybe in this lifetime, the way you're selling yourself, and I don't think anybody watching this is probably like selling their soul in some like huge way, right? But being able to witness that and see that others you're looking up to or being inspired by their results, that might be something they are doing. And like, think about I always like ask people to think about the much wider look, because it's not just this lifetime. Like, how is the work you're doing now impacting you in the next 5 lifetimes?
I
Because you
love
could
that.
be erasing karma like by the work you're doing, or you could be adding stuff in. Like, I'm not trying to add anything, I'm trying to let things get lighter and lighter and lighter.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
that's a
don't need to
really
be
good
adding
point.
more.
That's a really good point. Yeah, viewing it that way. And that's why we kind of see like, the mass rituals that are done like in the media now are just like so much more obvious to us because they have to get more intense. We didn't need this level of ritual, or I won't say I'll say like the lower forces didn't need this level of ritualization, 20, 30, 40 years ago. But now that everyone's woken up to it, the power is less intense because it's feeding on like that unconscious fear or that unconscious power. And so that's why we're starting to see the rituals get more and more and more and more intense because they have to, because they're not doing the same thing. So that's already evidence to us that this system is starting to dissipate and starting to collapse. So there's no use in even trying to keep up with it or trying to like learn about it now. It's about paying attention to where our soul is going. So
Yeah, and I feel like too, this is something I've been experiencing, like, because I'm just super, super sensitive to whatever's happening in the collective. Like sometimes when that fear is injected, that's how I see it happening. Like if you had a cup of water and someone's putting fear in that's like blue dye and it makes the whole thing turn blue, or like it's not solidly blue, but it's translucent. Like when you notice yourself starting to feel the fear come in, like really doing whatever you need to do to unplug from that system, to disconnect from it, to cleanse your energy. Sometimes this stuff takes me like days. Like, I also think that I experience collective energy probably a million times more than like the average human walking. Like, so I'm just very attuned to it. But like, even when we see ourselves in fear, what you were just saying of not paying attention to the rituals or the stuff that's happening, like we don't need to dive into all the conspiracy theories necessarily anymore because they're revealing themselves. Like,
yeah,
plug back into whatever it is you're desiring that you want,
yeah,
that the energy that feels comforting to your system, not by spiritually bypassing, be like, oh, I'm not going to look at this. Let me just look at the light only over here. Not that, but like letting yourself feel whatever's there. And then like, actually that none of that's even real. What do I choose in that? Cause then there's a choice. And like going back to how we started this, like you might be at your altar or whatever, and you're like, I want to manifest this. And you might feel the fear come in of like, well, we can give you this if you do this, or you can get the 7-figure job if you go do the job you fucking hate and you're miserable 24/7 and you're radiating hate and poison to everybody around you. Or, you know, and there might be another alternative to that, or you can choose what feels light to you and what feels joyous and what feels like you really giving the true contribution of your spirit and your gifting. And you like everyone might be in that moment where you have those two choices. And I think we probably all have those moments every day. Sometimes where it's like, oh, are you going to respond or react to something?
Yeah.
Let it be as small as that. And I was watching
Totally.
this, it's funny how like everything always just like intertwines perfectly. I was watching on Gaia the other day. That woman, Carolyn Miss, has this series called like Sacred Power. She was talking about every single day in like so many moments, we're choosing whether we're going to go into the shadow, into our darkness, or into our light. She was like, the light only has one answer for something, whereas the darkness will always have like a million answers. So for example, if you set an intention that you want to go to the gym, the darkness is like, oh, you can just sleep in longer. You could go later today. Like, it's really not a big deal. You can just like, it's no problem. And the light is like, get up. You made a commitment. Or
Yeah.
like, well, I could do this. I could like lie about, you know, like there's all these little moments where we're choosing that. And this is like a microcosm of what we're talking about on a bigger scale,
Yeah.
to bring it really tiny and then all the way out to multiple lifetimes.
No, I love that. That's actually why I stopped. Well, I wouldn't say completely stopped, but for a while, like a couple years, like I took a break from doing any moon stuff. Like I was not doing any new moon. I didn't pay attention to moon cycles. I was just like, I'm not gonna do the moon stuff right now. Didn't do any eclipse or any astrological rituals because that can also become like a false portal. That can also become a way to like people get really swept up. People get like really energetically swept up in that. And like what you're not doing in that sense is you're not actually sometimes feeling your own self and your own light. So yeah, it's like I don't know really where I was going with that, but if you are someone that struggles with like energetic boundaries, or you know, a lot of people not having the money that they want to is not having that right energetic boundaries in place, because the money actually can't land because there's nowhere for it to land. And I always suggest my clients like just temporarily unplug from rituals and not practicing anything on eclipses and all of that kind of stuff, because you're keeping more of your energy. You're finding your own pulse. You're finding your own rhythm with things and not necessarily always needing to be like plugged into a collective system too. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like you said, like the light is really simple. It doesn't have to always be intricate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what I hear you saying too with all of that is like, when we learn how to discern our own rhythms, our own cycles, our own energy, we can choose like what feels good to plug into and what doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Whereas
especially,
if we're using it as like an external system and we're bringing it internal, like moon cycles or astrological events and things like that, and we're like, I think about like the Lionsgate portal, like that's a great example of like an external system that people bring in, because a lot of people don't actually understand what it is. They don't understand the Sirius alignment and all that kind of stuff. They bring it in, and then on 8/8 they're like, I gotta do all these rituals and I gotta do all this stuff today, when actually if you were in tune with your own cycles and your own energy, you would have just been naturally inspired to do something. Like sometimes I'll do stuff and I'm like, oh, it just happens that it's a full moon today. Like, you know, then you're really connected in. It's not an external thing that you're trying to bring internal, which is also a materialization timeline, which is like represents spiritual degrading, right? Is taking something external and bringing it internal. That's not how we're supposed to be doing it. We're supposed to be bringing it internal, it manifesting it, creating it in the external. So
Yeah. So moral of the story, you are sovereign in yourself and unplug from everything external of you.
at least I think at least temporarily, because then it's like you just know, what's up. If
Yeah.
not, it's easy to get, again, like having the premise that it's easier to fall into that. It's easier to fall into like lower entities and like a lower timeline of things. It's a simpler choice to make. It's like, it's not as hard. It's easier knowing that, and then like keeping your guard up and making sure, yeah, that you're like maintaining your energetic sovereignty.
Yeah, and energetic boundaries are like just as important to be setting as the other boundaries in our life, especially because like one thing I just want to touch on um with smoking weed, a lot of people don't know that when also this happens when you're drinking alcohol, your auric field opens and we're much more like think about when you drink, everybody in the audience who's watching this, think about when you drink and you like lose all your inhibitions and you're like on a table, like maybe this is in college or something. But your inhibitions are much lower. Your auric field has opened and actually holes can be created where other entities are able to come in from that space. That's like a perfect example of, you know, the societal acceptance of drinking all the time or even just having one glass of wine. And I'm not saying that that's like wrong, but there's no education for us ever about what actually is happening on an energetic level when we're in those states. And for me, I noticed like when like I don't think weed is bad in any capacity. I'm very addicted to it. So I'll still like enjoy it once in a blue moon.
Same.
I can't have it at home or it's like I'll just smoke all day. Like I can't control myself. And I know when I stopped smoking, like my gifts became so much wider because if I had had those gifts when I was smoking 20 times a day or however much I was smoking, like there would have been so many scary entities in my field. Like that was my soul like protecting me. Because I would have
Yeah.
been so open and I wouldn't have had the boundaries to understand like, oh, I don't want this gargoyle. I don't know if gargoyles are really bad, but like I don't want that energy in my field starting to direct my movement because that's what happens. The dark energy starts to um it's not like we're possessed or something by a demon like movies would say, but it's that you start being guided to do certain things from that darker energy rather than from the Christed light within you or whatever you would want to call it. Um and so that's the danger and why if you're engaging with people who are doing energetic work with you or if you're doing it yourself, like make sure you're aware of how to protect yourself. Um because especially like I think a lot of us as light workers have felt this. There I have felt many times that there's something that's actively trying to keep me from doing whatever's in my highest path. Sometimes that might be going to the gym, but like the more that's the perfect example. Like the more you give in and press snooze every day, guilty, or the more you say, "Oh, I'm not going to go to the gym. I'll just do it tomorrow." That's actually dark energy because it's not of your highest good. Because moving your body is good for you. It's good for to clean your field like that. So the more we feed the dark energy, or the more you feed maybe like, oh, well, I'm just doing this once, it's not a big deal, then the more that starts to guide your life. And then you have a full blown addiction, or then you have, it's a harder pattern to break. And it takes a lot more energy to break it. Whereas if you never would have gone down that path in the first place, you might be in a whole different timeline. And I think that's how dark energy works. And that's actually what Carolyn Miss was saying in that Gaia thing I was talking about. She was like, that's how it works. It's super, super subtle. And people think it's going to be like, you know, a demon grabbing your ankle in bed. It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
I noticed that with weed too, of just I have like 95% less self-sabotage now, not smoking. And now I look at my patterns and my habits when I was and recognizing that it's not, I wouldn't even say that my spiritual gifts have increased, because that was also my relationship with using weed, was that I did feel like it did increase my psychic or spiritual gifts, but there's less noise now. There's one solid message I'm getting every single day, and I can actually hear it because there aren't 10,000 freaking things coming through at one time. So I totally feel that. And I can notice now when someone's high all the time. I can just, it's easier for me to see the behavior around it, or like how it actually does impact the energy. It is literally like a cloud in front of them. They might be getting amazing insights. They might have like these amazing experiences, but I think people that are high every single day, and I could speak for that since I was high every single day,
Guilty here.
I can see now how it created a fog around my aura, and it created distractions. And that is a very like Luciferic entity, right? Is like, keep us in the illusion, keep us in the fantasy, keep us all distracted. There's already enough of that on this plane. There's enough to keep me entertained and distracted. I don't need to like be adding to that or like enhancing that even more. So yeah, it's just interesting after 4.5 months now of not using it and having it like fully out of my system, really looking back and seeing like, wow, it's like things that were huge limitations for me before are just like no longer a problem. It's actually just simplified so much. And that's a perfect example of like a sacrifice, right? That's a spiritual sacrifice. We gave up something in this 3D environment, something you and I both love and cherish and would, love to do every single day, all day, every day. We gave it up because that's what's required. And that's like the true nature of like, that's a really good example of like a sacrifice to make.
That's a really good example, because it's something you care about, but also that isn't of your highest good.
Mm-hmm.
And also like, and I don't know if this would apply for you. I think this might be a little different, but like everybody buying weed now at dispensaries, like that shit is pharmaceutical weed. Like it's laced with a lot of other things. The way it's grown with pesticides, not from small farmers like in the 70s, that were growing it with love and like cleanly with fresh, nice soil. Like, my friend gave me a vape pen like a few months ago, and I noticed the same pattern where I was like using it all the time. And when I stopped using it, I was like, oh my God, like this is not even what my experience of stopping weed was. There's like this other chemical thing here that's disgusting and like made me feel even more addicted to it. And so there's also like that component with, weed specifically.
That's weed's a perfect example of like a degrading of like, now in addition to like the pesticides and all of that type of thing, like that's definitely valid, but it's also, you're smoking a hybrid of a hybrid of a hybrid of a hybrid of a hybrid. You're not connected back to the plant. And we can see that with like wheat, like how everyone's gluten intolerant now, myself included. Why my great grandmother, who was like 97, 99 years old when she passed away, how she became gluten intolerant when she was like 85, when she used to bake pies and homemade bread. It's because wheat also became hybridized. They hybridize it to make that specific result. So it's like the same kind of thing with the money. Like you're no longer resonating with it because it's so far connected from what the original intention was. So I think that's a great point. I mean, all I have to see now is the behaviors of the people inside dispensaries to be able to tell that there's something there's something like not organic about this. There's something like deeply, deeply wrong with how this plant is being used. So yeah, I can taste it. Like I never could do the dispensary stuff for very long.
Yeah. And that's going to be available everywhere pretty soon.
Yeah.
So that's just a note of like, I don't know, just be careful with it. For me, I noticed like, so with you were saying like self-sabotage and procrastination. For me, I noticed when I would smoke, or when I wouldn't smoke, I would get so agitated. And like behind the agitation, there was a whole other world that I had like never explored. And I was like, whatever, I don't want to deal with that. I'm just going to smoke again. And I did that for like a long time, not knowing that that's actually what I was doing. But then when that space was cleared and I was willing to go into the agitation because I wasn't smoking and there was no other choice, it opened up this whole other realm where I was like, oh, now I can actually go into my soul work. Before it was like I was on path, but it wasn't like, it was in the neighborhood, not in the driveway.
Right. Yeah.
So, but it didn't, this is also the thing I think with darkness. It's like, and this isn't saying that like you shouldn't ever smoke weed if you're watching this. Like, we're not saying that. It's just noticing the little pathways that like lead you down the road of not being in your highest light.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's just relevant because a lot of people, almost everyone I talk to wants to quit weed, but they can't. So that's a sign right there. This is like a larger thing. And if you think about the legalization of it too, a consciousness altering plant is suddenly legalized, but it only became legalized to the point where the plant is like so disconnected from its original form. Like, it's like you always gotta second guess something. If the government is co-signing on it, you have to second guess it at that point. So I think it's highly relevant because I know a lot of spiritual people use plant medicines, and a lot of them also want to stop using plant medicines. So
yeah,
it's like it's a more prevalent problem, I think, than even like drinking. Like I feel like alcohol or like alcoholism feels more of like a normie kind of problem. Like in the spiritual community, we don't really know a lot of people that are like alcoholics or stuff, but like weed, mushrooms, like DMT, ayahuasca, like doing all that kind of stuff in the spiritual community is like, that's just as easily like a trap for us to fall into. And that is actually, I think my prediction is it's soon going to be sold to us as the way to get to God, as the way to ascend. That's going to be sold to us as the solution of how we can connect, which is going to be further, a lot of us used it as a tool to assist us in connecting, but we have to be able to find that from like a sober mind and like from a completely unaltered state. Because soon that's going to be advertised as the only way to connect. So
yeah, and probably like pharmaceutical labels will have their hands all over that.
Yeah, there'll be some like Pfizer, DMT, and some stuff like that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And one note with that, I think an easy way to tell if you're maybe like addicted to this, because it's basically it's abuse of the plant when you're relying on it too much versus like what they say about ayahuasca particularly is you're never supposed to go after it. You have to let it find you.
Yeah.
So that might mean that the ceremony finds you or like whatever way. And if you're not willing to wait for that to happen, which could take years or decades, like if you're not willing to wait, like that's that desperation of like, no, but I want to control how the universe or how my soul, like I just see it as how the soul has already directed things to go for us in this life and what we've chosen probably. But like allowing what's meant to come to you to come to you. We can set the intention and we can put good energy towards that and see it happening. But then with plant medicine, particularly, like let it come to you. Don't force that to happen, because also I think that's when people have like really bad trips and stuff. It's like, well, ready, dude. We told you. Like,
yeah, totally. Yeah. For sure.
Well, we've covered a broad range of topics today, from Luciferian sort of topics to dark entities to weed and plant medicine. What else?
Yeah. It's a lot of stuff. I feel like we could do a whole episode on weed. Maybe that should be our next one.
We totally should. Yeah, if you guys, leave comments about what you thought about this episode, but also if you have questions for us about quitting weed, because we both did this, put your questions below. I think we should definitely do a session on that because so many people are having trouble quitting. And I remember when I did in 2020, everyone was like, you can't even be addicted to weed. And it's like, well, I am, so you can. And like people wouldn't believe me. And everyone was like, no, it's fine. It's a plant. You can't be addicted. And people like, yeah, it's a whole thing. And I think now, especially because of quarantine and people being so isolated, like that's become such a crutch. So anyways, if you have questions you want to ask us, put them in the comments and I'll note them down for when we do that session together.
And I didn't even know I could quit until I watched you do it. You were like such a huge part of that for me. Because every day when the first couple weeks, I'm like, okay, Allie did this. Like you did this. So you like gave me strength, even though you didn't know it. But yeah.
Well, also Jacquelynne, if you want to go, if you guys watching, if you want to go into some of the concepts we talked about in a deeper way, she has a training about that. Do you want to talk about it for a second?
Yeah. So the training is on my website. It's numbersfairy.com. And it is a short training where I cover the Luciferic and Armonic energies. So we just dive into a little bit more about how those spiritual impulses are showing up in today's world and actually how you can evolve your abundance out of those forces or be able to learn from those forces, move into really what it is explaining the evolution from Luciferic and Armonic influences into Christ consciousness with money. We didn't get too much into that on this video, but that's good because that's really what we dive into on that training. So it's numbersfairy.com and it's only $35 for the training.
And I'll put the link in the comments, you guys, below, so you can see it there. Thanks so much, Jacquelynne, for coming on.
Thank you.
Some of the funnest conversations. And if you guys are new to me, if you're still watching, you came from Jacquelynne, I'm Allie. What's up? I do energy healings, and I basically, like, my work is in getting people really in integrity with their soul blueprint and applying that throughout their whole life through a lot of different ways of working with me. So you can go to my website, alliewilkins.com, if you want to see anything more about that, or follow me on Instagram, or subscribe here and you can see some of the work I do here on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. And please leave a comment with any thoughts. This is like a really juicy one, so I'm excited to read the thoughts and comments that you guys have here on this. Okay, we'll see you next week. Well, I'll see you next week for the next video, and Jacquelynne will definitely be on again another time.